Well, did you pick up from that what's going on in Afternoon Live today? I understand that you didn't hear the words, but you did see the pictures. And it's Maureen Lipman, our very special guest, and Nutter, of course, cooking by remote control with some very fortunate viewer, and fashion, a very special challenge, and lots more beside. But that's all on this afternoon on ITV. But first of all, a very, very special welcome for somebody who's a very special guest, and it's Anthea Turner.
Diagweave Galera Cordia August Fáilte Road. Welcome to Be My Guest with me, Mary Honan, on Lir Media TV, supporting the Samaritans, Limerick and Tipperary. And oh, my very special guest, what's to not say, or what is to say about my next guest, the lovely Bibi Baskin. You're in Cork now, aren't you, Bibi?
I am indeed, yeah. I moved here from India about 6 years ago, and I love it. No complaints whatsoever. Munster is great. And I'm an Ulster woman by birth, you know.
I know, but oh my God, Bibi, I just said it to you off camera. That glorious voice is even more glorious now than it. Do you know, it's like a fine wine.
Well, it's aged. Let me tell you that, Mary. It's certainly aged since I was on the box in Ireland all those years ago.
But for anyone who doesn't know Bibi, certainly not in Ireland, everyone would know Bibi. Bibi was for many, many years on our national broadcaster, had her own show, Bibi, and her own chat show, and she was a household name in this country, not least for her beautiful speaking voice. I'm sure everyone has said it to you, Bibi, down through the years.
Oh, it's a great compliment, and I every time I hear it, it just warms the cockles. No, not everybody said it all through the years at all, Mary. In fact, nobody ever remarked on it when I worked and lived in Ireland. And it's only since I've come back in the last 6 years that I hear it, and very frequently at that. So I have no idea why it's so. It's been described as like velvet, like melting chocolate. I love all this, by the way. I love it all. Like rustling sheets, one fella said to me, and the king of them all, a voice like vocal Viagra.
Well, you have, I'm sure, Bibi, but there was one, someone asked me, were you complimented by the guy that rang in the station one time? I don't want to actually say it. It was just, you'll have to actually probably YouTube it, but safe to say it was a compliment. He considered it a compliment, and he was absolutely fascinated with Bibi.
You'd have to say it very late at night, and perhaps only after a gin and tonic or two. It was of that nature. But you know, amazingly, again, that was a long time ago, because let me think.
Right, even that embarrassed Ryan. And it was very hard to embarrass Ryan, but nobody was expecting anybody to come in and
But
say,
I had a follow-up on it since. I got an anonymous letter, just no real address, you know, no detail in the address, just the town that I live nearby, which is Crosshaven in County Cork. And it's just said, I knew that fella that said he wanted to do that thing to you, and he's still alive, and you're still gorgeous. Oh boy, you know.
It was worth it to listen to Ryan go, what's his name, go completely silent for a few seconds, you know. But Jerry Ryan, Lord rest him, another great broadcaster, Bibi.
That was awful. I mean, I think the whole country was shocked by his death.
Oh, I remember where I was when I heard it, and I rang my friend, who is not the most emotional person in the world, and I said to her, Carmel, I said, I mean, she's in control of her emotions, and I said, Carmel, Jerry Ryan has died, and she said, you're joking. And I said, no, they've just announced it on the radio, and she just burst out crying. She said, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? She said, I used to do the ironing and listen to Jerry Ryan every morning. And I mean, I loved him. He was somebody that had a handle on women and men. He was able to cross that divide and understand women.
And full of devilment. I like that part of him too.
That's what I loved about him.
He really didn't give a toss about anything or anybody.
No.
It wasn't an act, it was genuine.
No, he
Yeah.
genuinely didn't care. But how did you? Well, obviously, with a voice like yours, somebody probably approached you about getting. Tell me about the young Bibi Baskin. How did you grow up? Where did you grow up?
I grew
In
up in
Munster?
southwest Donegal, near Killybegs, in a town called Ardra. And I went to Trinity as a young student, and I spent a long time in Trinity, 8 years.
What did you study?
Irish and English, and chopped around with philosophy and history and all sorts of things. And I probably would have been an eternal student if I could have afforded it. But one day you have to get up off your arse and say, I need
God,
to earn a living,
I
sadly.
I know, I know. I think I'm an
Well,
eternal student,
we
or I
all, I
aim to
think,
be.
yeah, up to a
Yeah.
point we are. But the getting into RTE, nobody approached me at all. I decided, I'll tell you what it was. I was made editor of a new Irish language newspaper called Anish. And Anish was very different to its predecessors. This one was lively and full color and tabloidy sort of thing in terms of design. And so I was interviewed as editor quite a bit on radio and a bit on television. And I thought, oh, now,
I
this
like this.
podcasting. Yeah, I think
I
you're right.
like this.
And I wrote a letter. Now, it's hard for your listeners and viewers some of them, to imagine a time when there was no internet and no emails. And you wrote a letter, with your pen and a piece of paper and a stamp and an
Feel
envelope.
well.
And I wrote that in black ink with a fountain pen because I love nice writing tools. You see, old fashioned doll that way. And I remember nowadays the young folk would be so skilled and they would have learned from the internet and Googled this and that as to how to write such a letter. But I was as naive and green as you could make them in those days. And I remember I just wrote, I wonder if you would have, and this is it verbatim, I wonder if you would have a small job for a female voice, because I think my voice is not the worst part of me. And that's what I wrote. Can you imagine the naivety? As it happened,
So that would make you look at that. You'd remember that. Because it's not like people are so used to trying to sell themselves and trying to
yeah,
say I am this and you need me because I can
oh,
do this and this and this for you, but you were just straight. I would remember that letter more than
yeah.
any.
Well, it kind of worked because they had a very small job indeed. It's a position that's still there. It's called What It Says in the Papers, and it's a summary of the newspapers. It goes out before 8 in the morning and before 9 in the morning.
Yeah.
And I got a job doing that once a week for about maybe 6 months or so. And that's how it all started.
And the rest was history.
The rest was history.
And how long did it take you, Bibi, before you actually were recognized enough for them to say, because you were one of the few women, even still.
Yeah,
I
I
mean, if you
know.
look at Marion Finucane, Lord rest her,
Yeah,
she had her own show, and you look at Claire Byrne now, and
yeah.
um,
Miriam, of course.
Miriam McCallaghan.
Yeah,
Um, there's still very few women hosting their own shows. Certainly not light entertainment and and and
sure.
and that. And you were really the first
I was. I was.
that I can remember ever.
No, no, you're right. I was the way they say it now. Apparently, is that I was the first woman in Ireland to have a live TV chat show of her own, and that's true. Yeah.
Yes, you really were the Oprah of Ireland.
Oh, now listening.
Before Oprah even. And no, seriously, you were, I mean, you were as big in Ireland as she is.
I suppose, in a sense, I was, in insofar as that during that time. I mean, the other side of the coin is I couldn't go anywhere because I had
People
no
do that.
privacy at all. And then I would just be recognized, and that's lovely, and it's very endearing. But it kind of, in all honesty, I think I was a bit too immature for it at that time,
Yeah.
and I had no real mass on it. Whereas now, after 20 years away, 5 in the UK and 15 in India, when I came back this time, I thought, I'll be coming back to complete oblivion. Nobody will know me. Nobody remember me. Hooray. Oh my God, I was totally wrong.
That's
Totally
that's
wrong.
so self-deprecating.
No,
You
but
know. But
really.
it's amazing that, going back to the voice again. When I was, when my mom and I were, when my mom was alive, and you would go into shops and people would turn and say, "I knew it was the two of you," and they'd recognize our voices for some reason or other. Mom had a very deep, husky voice, and they'd recognize the voice. So I can imagine that even people in a shop, who may never have seen you on the TV, but certainly heard your voice, would recognize you even still before they'd even see you.
Amazing. And I have to say, it's very endearing. I appreciate it very much indeed. I still don't quite understand why, but it's lovely. And I'm kind of lapping it up these days. I'm a bit older now, you see. You get a bit nicer when you get older sometimes.
But you've never lost the love of media, have you?
I still enjoy it a lot. Yeah. I've become a huge fan of social media.
Yeah.
I didn't bother with it at all when I lived away. And it was only when I came back here that a good friend of mine who teaches, Facebook and all those things said, "Come on, you've got to get with it." And I said, "No, no, no, no. That's for young ones. No." And he was stubborn. And it's great to have a stubborn
Stubborn
friend who's
friend.
knowledgeable because he insisted. And you know how sometimes, Mary, you'll just give in order to get rid, you know, rather than tell
That
them to bugger
nag,
off.
that nagging voice behind you or in front of you, just go away. All right,
Oh, that's it.
all right. I just do it.
That's right.
Yeah.
It's the best thing I've done in years.
I
Uh,
have a friend like that, Dr. Michael Casey, very much like that, who pestered and pestered and pestered and pestered me
yeah.
to actually apply for a postdoctoral research. And I just kept saying, I'll never get it. I'll never get it. And you tend to kind of not want to do something because you're afraid of failure. So I
That's right.
finally gave in and applied because it was easier to just give in and apply and just put it to the gods
Yeah, exactly. It's a good attitude
than
to
listen to him. I just couldn't
have.
listen to him.
But you know, a great advantage it had for me that I didn't expect at all at the time. Being 20 years away, a lot of my cohorts were, perhaps a lot of them were a little bit older than I was. So they had retired and they'd kind of disappeared off the scene. And they weren't and still aren't very much involved in social media at all. And I hadn't been very good at keeping in touch because I tend to, wherever I lay my hat is my home, and when I went to India, that was my home. I didn't maintain huge connections back here in Ireland.
Yes,
So what social media did for me is that it introduced me to a whole new generation of people that I never knew. And they knew me or knew of me because they used to watch the show with their mammies. And
yes.
I know the reason why they were allowed to watch the show with their mammies, because the producer I had, who was, sadly he's no longer with us, Justin Nelson,
Oh,
an
yes.
absolute gentleman, lovely, lovely man, but very conservative. So on my show, even though it was after 9:30 at night, there would be no monkey business or no, you know what I mean? None of that stuff at all. So
There'd be no
therefore,
Gay Byrne
no,
introducing
no, it wasn't like
condoms
that.
to the
No, no.
Irish public.
No, no, it wasn't. So mammies could have their kids with them. And that's why, and I'm so delighted and I appreciate it so much. I now know a whole generation of younger people in Ireland through social media.
Yes,
I've, I've a huge interest in food in recent years, since running the hotel in India. And now I know lots of chefs, top chefs in Ireland, and people who have similar interests. It's been fantastic.
is
Really
that
lovely.
an elephant behind you on the shelf behind you? Is it a bronze elephant? Maybe I'm wrong. The shelf up. No, I thought it was. Yeah, I thought. Oh no, no,
That
they're
one.
they look like masks
Is it?
above.
Oh,
No,
it's that one. It's masks. Yeah.
yeah, no, from a distance now, or maybe it's my eyesight is so bad. It looks like a bronze, because I have a beautiful bronze elephant, and I thought maybe you'd bought
Oh,
it in India, and it's not a bronze. It's a wooden elephant. It was bought in Thailand,
lovely.
by a friend, a neighbor friend, family member. I always looked at him as family, who died, and his sister gave me the elephant.
Uh,
Um,
I
beautiful.
have an elephant, yeah, outside the door. a kind of a bronzy one, not real bronze. I don't know what it's made from, but anyway, she's out there and she guards the house.
I
She's
love
fantastic.
I love elephants.
Yeah, me too. Me
I
too.
love elephants. But Bibi, at what stage did you decide? Did you ever think, again with the voice, did you ever think that that voice would translate internationally and that you might have tried, or do you think that it was an opportunity lost, if you like, or could you do it again? You could still do it, to break the American market, if you like. I mean, your voice would have translated beautifully to the Irish Americans abroad. The Americans would have absolutely loved that voice.
Well, no, I don't see that. You know, I do believe the longer you live, the more you come to realize that your life is really a collection of phases. And I've kind of done the television phase. And now I then got interested in setting up a business and then in running a hotel. And now I'm interested in doing work on social media. So I've always liked variety. In fact, you could say it's been my downfall because any normal, sane person would not give up a good job in RTE. You know, the first woman to have a show of her own is prestigious. Now, I didn't make the big money they make nowadays, but I
Yeah.
was perfectly
But you
happy
would
with it.
have if you'd stayed.
Yeah, I undoubtedly, in fact, I can
Yeah.
say. But no, you see, I have to move on when I want to try something new.
Well, I understand that. I mean, I was a dancer all my life, a dance teacher, a dance judge, then went to the art college, then was in Bunratty Castle. Now I'm in doing this and did a PhD in between. And I like variety as well. So I understand. I think you have to have, some people can do the same job for the rest of their lives.
Yes.
I
So
don't know how they can do that, but
but they need it, I believe, Mary. I think that psychologically they're made of a very different type than you and me, because I think they need the predictability to give them security.
yeah.
Would get very frightened if they thought, oh my God, my contract's running out next year. What am I going to do?
Now, I don't like change. For someone who doesn't like change, I like variety.
Yeah,
I always had a day job and my dancing at night in Bunratty. So I always had the day job and that. And but I like learning new things, and I
yeah.
think you're like that.
Absolutely, completely. I never know what the next new thing is going to be, or if there will be another one. But I love what I'm doing at the moment, and all last week since I started this new Facebook private group, Bibi's Happy Place. All last week I was teaching myself to design very basic little cute designs. They're not great, but I'm more of a words person
Yeah.
than a visual person. So I was right pleased with that. Yeah. So the learning
Tell us
was.
a little. Tell us a little. Well, firstly, tell us at what stage did you decide that's it? I'm gone from RTE. I'm going to break their hearts and break the listenership's heart,
No,
and up and leave RTE and go to the UK.
I didn't see it that way at all, Mary. But I do
So you
remember,
broke that man's heart, I'm sure.
I go away. I do remember that I had what they call an aha moment or the light bulb moment. And it was driving into the car park in RTE. And I'd been doing it already for about 8 years. And I was mid 40s. And I remember just thinking, oh my God, am I going to be doing this for the next 20 years? Into the same place, out of the same place? And that thought of 20 years of sameness, in that moment, I knew I had to go. I didn't know where I was going to go or what I was going to do, but I knew I had to get. The way I described it afterwards, Mary, was that I realize there's a big, wide, wonderful world out there, and I wanted a little nibble of it. Well, by God, I got a big dollop rather than the little nibble, but there you go.
Yeah. So you upped and you went to the UK.
I was in the UK, and I stuck with broadcasting because, in a sense, I felt it was the only thing I knew.
And it got you through that progression of moving from one country to another,
It
because you
did.
still had that continuity, if you like,
That's
of
right.
job, of career.
It was familiar, but different. It was different in that London was this marvelously exciting multicultural city, and I was very happy to be part of it. And it was sophisticated and lovely and worthy of exploring, all of that sort of thing. But it was familiar, and the familiarity caught up with me after 5 years, because then I realized, wait a minute, Baskin, you haven't changed enough at all. All you've changed is your geography. You're still broadcasting in an English speaking country not far from home. So I quit again.
And were your parents, your family alive? Were you an only child, Bibi, or had you brothers and sisters? What was
Two
your
sisters.
family?
No, we're not that close in truth. We're two sisters, they're a lot older. And I always paddled my own canoe pretty much anyway. So to be honest, I was such a ragamuffin. I didn't consult. And I would say to anybody who's going to bring in major change, just ask your best friend or your partner, if you have one, what you should do, but nobody else, because other people will pull and haul at your decision. And sometimes it's because they love you and they don't want to see you go.
No.
Sometimes it's because they're worried about you and they fear that you might fall down on your bum. And all of these reasons will only serve to make you very muddled up. So I didn't ask. I just spoke to a friend. And
Were you ever afraid of failure, or were you just
no.
one of these? I think the most successful business people in the world are the people who actually take the most extraordinary chances, sometimes putting their homes and their businesses mortgaging everything in order to go for that dream that sometimes a normal person would actually pull back from and say, no, I'm glad I have what I have now and I'm satisfied with that. Were you always the chance taker? Because it
No.
was a huge chance to up as an Irish woman, and head off to India. That
Yeah.
was a chance in itself, do you know?
Yeah, but I wouldn't be that big of a risk taker. I wouldn't be risking the roof over my head.
Yeah,
Not in that way.
no,
So,
not right.
and also, I used to give motivational talks about all of this, bringing change into your life, before COVID came in and shut us all down. And one of the things I used to say was that you have to be prepared to make sacrifices. You have to cut the cloth to suit once you leave behind the nice job. For example, when I went to London, I didn't go and stay in a fancy penthouse apartment. I couldn't have afforded that. I stayed as a lodger in the house of my sister's great friend, an elderly lady. So, you have to cut the cloth to
So,
suit. Yeah. You asked me also, though, and I think it's a really good question, Mary. Had I any fear of failure? That lack is the key to being successful when you make
yeah,
changes in your life. When I started the hotel with no qualifications in business or in hospitality and no experience, I remember thinking, I don't know if this is going to work. I
like
don't know
me.
if it'll succeed or fail. I really didn't know. But here's the trick. I didn't care. I really was prepared for it to fail if it did, and celebrate its success if it succeeded. And I think if you can detach yourself emotionally from the outcomes, it's very useful. It'll help you sleep better at night.
What was it about India that drew you? Because a lot of people are drawn to India. Was it the
Yeah,
spirituality you were brought up yourself in the Church of Ireland community,
yeah,
am I right? Yes.
okay.
And my father's side of the family were Church of England and Methodist. And so I suppose I grew up with a healthy respect for all religions and understanding of there being other religions beside Catholicism here in Ireland, you know.
Hmm.
But was it the spirituality or the Indian philosophy or the Indian spirituality that you were drawn to, or what was it?
Well, sometimes, speaking of religion, I remember a hymn from my childhood: God moves in a mysterious way,
Yeah,
his wonders to perform. I'm not sure how true that is, but there was definitely something there that I was unconscious of at the time. It was mysterious to me. But when I look back on my days in Trinity and studying English, I was always drawn to authors and writers who'd been heavily influenced by India.
Yeah.
Bertrand Russell and God, T.S. Eliot may be the same. So there must have been some kind of a natural pull there. I
Yeah.
wasn't aware of it at the time. The reason I grew to love it is that it was gentle. You
Yeah.
know, the way the Western world, the Western life in Ireland,
It's
in
so
America,
fast.
Australia, it's quite aggressive. If you, I often say this, if you even look at our language, oh, I'm going to fight cancer. Fight. Why must we fight? Indians are so much gentler. And that's what I liked about them. The spirituality is there. It might not fit in with yours or mine. I mean, there's a huge belief that God controls and decides everything in our lives, and there's no free will. And that that was a terrible shock to me when I would be dealing with my staff in the hotel, and they'd say, I don't have, if God wants me to do it, I'll do it. And I think, what? Get up off your arse and do it now. God or no God.
That's a real cop out. I think the Irish might try that.
Mm.
I didn't come into work today, Bibi, because God didn't want me to.
Yeah, wouldn't that be lovely? Wouldn't that
Wouldn't
just
it?
be lovely? Yeah. What an easygoing way to live. But I was attracted by the people, yeah. And the pace was very gentle and very easygoing. And also, I suppose I'd set things up in such a way, between that and also due to the confluence of other circumstances in my life at the time, I was set up in such a way as that I really had nothing to come back to. I wasn't in a relationship.
Yeah,
I'd given up my job. I'd sold the house. I'd put in the pegs into the foundation for movement and starting anew. So it wasn't really that difficult. And again, talking about God moving in mysterious ways, or maybe our unconscious mind knowing things that we don't. When I went on that 3 week holiday, because it was only supposed to be a holiday of 3 weeks, I had two suitcases. One, the usual clothes, and the other full of notebooks and books.
yeah.
What was afoot there? I don't know. But there was something afoot there when I look back in it now that suggested I could stay if I wanted to. I had my essentials with me and I had nothing to go back to.
It's funny. A friend of my mom's.
These are some of the Indian titles that I've read over the years. I've certainly read them all and I loved a lot of them. I wonder if you recognize many. Let me know if you do. I'd love to hear about that.
It's funny. A friend of my mom's. She was a sister of the late Mick Lipper, who was a TD here in Limerick. He was the mayor of Limerick as well. Patricia, and she had moved to England when she was a very young girl to be educated by her aunts who were nuns, and she became a nurse, and she ended up nursing this Indian man's mother, and she ended up marrying him, and she spent half the time in India and half the time in the UK. And he was very wealthy. I mean, he had in Bombay he had cotton mills, and he was best friends of Pandit Nehru.
Oh, God.
So they were. She was always telling. Mom would be telling me stories about that Patricia would tell her about India and the spices and the foods and the colors and the jewelry, and of course the layers of gold bracelets. Do you know that the bangles, the Indian bangles? And I always grew up with a fascination. Even in the UK, when I'd go on holidays over there, I'd head straight to an Indian jeweler's because I
Really?
loved the Indian jewelry.
It's absolutely lovely, but there again, one of the many different things you come across and you find out about yourself when you go into a very different culture. Indian women in general are very fine boned. They're
Yeah.
finely built and structured. And I'm not, as Western women go, no, I'm not.
No.
Do you know, all those wonderful bangles, and you'd see all the colors and maybe
Oh,
20 of them.
along the arm.
I could never get one to fit me. I bought three in the end, and there's a little clip on that you can loosen it out. It's the only way I could get one to fit me. So the jewelry didn't work too well for me. But my God, it's gorgeous. And the
It is
fabric.
just heaven. I mean, I have jewelry. I love jewelry anyway. And I mean, my bracelet is Moroccan. yeah, Moroccan. I bought it in Morocco, years in 1993. I think 1994, and it's never come off me. But I just love that jewelry. But the Indian jewelry is exceptional.
It is. It is. Do
You
you
know,
know my memory of my very first image of India? I arrived at the airport, Trivandrum, down in the state of Kerala, which is down south. And a guy I'd worked with in the BBC used to go to that part of India for about, I think, 8 years previously. And he said, look, if you're going to come on your holiday, make sure you arrive when I'm there for a couple of days and I'll show you around. And he did. He met me at the airport in a nice car with the driver. But my God, he didn't shut up the whole time from the airport to the hotel. And I was an eager beaver. I wanted to look around at all this newness, but I had to be polite and talk to him. But out of the corner of my eye, once when we were moving along, I saw this lady on the roadside doing her job, which was with a small rusty tool, bashing stones, breaking stones. And she had a little bit of a palm leaf over her for protection from the sun, because it's tropical climate where I was. But she was wearing, now remember us as Westerners, we're in a tropical climate or in Spain or somewhere, and we have a white t-shirt and beige trousers, and we think that's cool.
cool.
She was doing that dirty, hard work, wearing a bright, mad pink sari. And I thought, I love this place already. The sheer daring of it, it was
My
fun.
dad, when he came from England, he used to come once a year on holidays because he wasn't working here in Ireland. He was English, and Mum wouldn't stay in England, and she came home here with me, and until he could get a job. But he'd come home with Indian saris to me because the women in work with him, a lot of Indians, and he'd bring saris over layered. And I still have about 10 saris at home that I bought in France, my first trip with Bunratty, and got an evening dress made out of one of the saris, and they're just stunning. But I remember him as a child, when I was a child, wrapping the sari around me and showing me how the women showed him to put it on me, and I just thought it was Indian when I wore it.
Well, you would have looked very Indian indeed. And of course, it's about 7 meters of fabric.
Yeah,
No
that's
shape in it at all, but so beautiful, just
just
magnificent.
magnificent. I bought it in royal blue with all open work lace all around at the edges, and I bought it in Kelly green, and then I bought chiffon ones with loads of flowers and everything on it. I still have them at home. I just have to lose weight to get it to buy a nice outfit, to
Well,
get a nice outfit made from it, because
do you know what you can do with them? And it works terrifically well. You can just wrap them around a pelmet. Is that what you call it? A curtain pole. And
yeah,
this lovely kind of organza or silk curtain.
never thought of that.
Now, there you go. There's your tip for the day.
But what was it like when you actually, at what point, Bibi, did you decide, because you stayed a long time in India,
Yeah, 15
did
years.
you settle in the first place that you actually moved to?
More
Or
or less, yeah.
and what was it? At what point? I was speaking to Father Ryan Duns just before this, and he was 11 years training to be a Redemptorist, and or sorry, a Jesuit. And I said, well, obviously you had a long time to think, and was there ever any moments in your time that you thought, I can't go ahead with this, this is not going to be, was there ever any moment in your time there that you thought, what am I doing here? Or did you have that comfort of knowing, well, if it doesn't work out, I can go home?
I think this is where I was, and people like me are very fortunate. Sometimes we would have a lot of Irish guests in the hotel, and sometimes they would ask me, and with concern too, do you miss Ireland? I was,
Yeah, I think everyone misses us.
well, it's amazing. I used to say, so long as you have a credit card in your arse pocket, you shouldn't miss anywhere. You can go to that place and get all the love and all the endearment and all the affection.
It
So,
was different years ago when you would have to
oh,
get an Aer Lingus flight, maybe €1,000 or whatever pounds or whatever it was for, or the boat.
Oh, terrible. With no hope of returning. No
Yeah.
hope at all. I was in a different situation, and I consider myself very lucky indeed. The bloody cat's over there, that's why I'm distracted. I've got a one-eared cat called Mr. Ian Cluis, because he's only the one
Ian Cluis.
Ian Cluis. And
That
I
means for my international audience, Ian is one and Cluis is ear. So he's only got one ear.
the one. So if you hear a rattle, it's him. No, I didn't have an aha moment this time, but I can best explain it, I think, this way. When I was intrigued by India, I was fascinated by so many different aspects of it. I was setting up a business, that in itself was different. I find there's not much logic in India, and I find that we rely a lot as Westerners on logic more than we know. So there was all sorts of excitement attached to it at the beginning. But as I learned from India, one of the many life lessons, they say every coin has two sides. And the other side is that it's frantic, it's disorganized, very poor communication skills, and it's hot. And I don't like heat, believe it or not. So after maybe, 10, 12 years of that, it was familiar now. So the excitement was gone. There was nothing new to discover unless I made some drastic big changes, which I wasn't in the mood to do. And I was also getting older. And however much we might complain about life in the Western world, it's an awful lot easier than in India. So it was time, for all those reasons I felt, for me to come back home. And I'm very glad I did.
But what was it like being a woman, an independent businesswoman in India? Were you faced with any challenges or many challenges?
Um, what's a challenge? It very much manifests according to your attitude to it. Now, soon after, about a year after I was there, when I was doing up the place that I bought, I couldn't understand why I had 40 men working for me then,
Wow.
roofing things and painting things and re-roofing and building a little Ayurvedic wellness center and turning an old room into a restaurant and doing up the bedrooms. And I became an interior designer overnight, which I so enjoyed. But one of the head guys.
Maybe you're a woman after my own heart in everything, we're sisters from another mister, isn't that what they say? You do these things because you have to do them, and then you actually get a love for them.
You do.
I did interior design as well.
Did you? Well, in this particular,
I did it for a year in the Limerick senior college.
Well, that's impressive. I was just a chancer. I did my
God,
own.
I did. I loved the design. I didn't like the technical side of it.
No, I wouldn't either. But just that story. So this guy who was sort of in charge of the tradesmen, I couldn't understand why he never even said hello. And I remember saying, God, would you think he'd just greet me? And it was explained to me by my Indian friend, that man has never been in the company of a white woman before. He doesn't know how to treat you. He doesn't know what to say to you. So I found it odd, but then I got used to it and not a bother. I was, to put it very bluntly, the only white girl in town. But that didn't bother me. Indians, even though they were colonized just as we were in Ireland, they have a very different attitude to the post-colonial world of their own. They would think I was English because I was English speaking. And in my area, actually, most people hadn't even heard of Ireland, would you believe it?
Yeah.
When I went there anyway. But, they would say, thank you for giving us the great railway system of India, which is a fabulous mechanism. And the British set that up. And thank you for giving us an international language. Whereas we in Ireland would say, those scoundrels, they robbed us of the Irish language. Such a different and loving attitude.
but it's so true, Bibi. When you look at what they did give countries and what they did add to countries, Britain. I was born in the UK, so I'm slightly biased. But when you look at what they did give and the contribution they did give, it was enormous.
Not everybody will agree, but listen, we could get lynched if we went down that road.
Yeah, no, but it was like, I mean, the railway alone, do you know? And I suppose I'd be lynched by my own mother, who was a Gaeilgeoir as well, and very Irish for saying that. But I mean, my poor father, you know, she used to speak. My dad was really quiet in English, and he'd be saying something to her, and she'd say, "What's your father saying, Mary?" And I'm in between them, and
Yeah.
they're both speaking English, but she was deaf, and he was speaking low and with an English, and she never understood him. I was like an interpreter between two two English speaking people. It was you should have been there, or if he stood up, if BBC was on TV, and at the end of it, you remember they used to have the
national
they
anthem.
play the national anthem, God Save the Queen, and Daddy would be just about, without even thinking, he'd be just about to stand up, and Mum would say, "Sit down. You're earning your living here."
I know. You have to be careful.
Misfortune. But social life there.
No, not a lot.
Your social life, I
No.
would imagine, being the only white woman.
No, not only that, not just a question of color, but about 80% still today of marriages in India are arranged marriages. Now, not to be confused with forced marriages, not at all. The arrangement is made by the parents. The young couple may have met once before they get married. And the arrangement is made according to educational status and money and the shade of the skin. Not the color, but the shade.
It's a caste system, isn't it?
Yeah, that's there as well. Now, because it's an arranged marriage setup, there's no dating. So who would ask me out? Nobody.
No, but even did you mix with women? Did you go to house parties? Did you get out of the hotel, or were you the sole white Irish person in the village, just working away for 14 years?
Yeah, more or less. But I had to have an Indian business partner. So he got to know me very well. He's just a partner. And we would go out to dinner and have drinks and dinner.
Oh, at least you had someone.
Yeah, that's the height of it. And then I got to know an Indian lady, and she would invite me to her house. But it's such a different culture, and we had such different life experiences. I mean, she was hugely rich. She's the biggest collector of Swarovski crystal in all of India.
Oh.
And these women, you know,
I have 4 little pieces.
I have one, I think, somewhere.
They're about that size.
Yeah, I know.
And I have one that goes on a silver chain that my mum bought me. It's a ball, a Swarovski crystal ball. Yeah. she's
we wouldn't have that much in common, you know? So no, there wasn't, but you know what? It was a busy time, and I was hugely interested in the project I was doing. And it was a very creative outlet for me, because I decided the menus. I learned how to cook South Indian food from the chefs during the rainy season. I had that interior design experience, and I've always been a big student, and it gave me loads of time to read, and books are very cheap in India. So I actually was in my element.
And was there anything you missed about home while you were there? No, isn't that amazing? Not even the language, because you were completely, as I say, I would give anything to be fluent in Irish. Anything. I really would. 2 languages, French and Irish. And I would love to have the fluency in the Irish. Mom didn't speak it once we came home. She just felt it was too much, so she lost it, more or less. It was rusty with her. You've obviously, have you tried to keep up the language while you were away? Did you listen to anything that was Irish?
No, not a thing. But we had poetry readings, as Gaeilge, on the back veranda of my hotel, and more than once. We had Irish speakers, fluent, whom I knew before I went there, and they came to visit. And I had a wonderful friend and the Limerick man, Gabriel Rosenstock, the poet. He and his wife were fluent in Irish. They came several times to visit. So I wasn't without company or culture. But speaking of language, I love languages. I've been learning Spanish every day now I think I'm on day 138 on Duolingo. I'm learning Spanish without a break. And so I took to learning the local language, Malayalam.
And I have the
So,
lingophone in French, the
oh, have you?
lingophone CDs.
Yeah. Well, I enjoyed that immensely. So no, and also, Mary, I grew up quite alone, so I'm used to my own company. And it wasn't difficult for me to spend a lot of time alone. And speaking of Irish today, as you mentioned, do I still speak it or am I fluent still? I've just done, before we got together, I just did an interview with Radio Fáilte, which is the north of Ireland, Belfast's only Irish language station. So yeah, I still blabber away, and I'm sometimes on Radio Mugelta and places like that. I love it.
So you never lost it. You
No,
never
no.
lost it. But when you came back, Bibi, why Cork? Why not Donegal? Because I mean, my uncle used to go to Donegal as a tour director, and he said there was no place like Donegal. He thought it was the most beautiful part of Ireland, but he said nobody would speak to you in the hotel until they'd find out you weren't the taxman.
Oh my God.
Once they knew you were a tour director, not the taxman, they were fine.
Fantastic. That's fantastic. Well, looking back at my life now, because I'm old enough to be able to look back quite substantially, I think the pattern of my life has been change. And that would explain why Cork. I didn't want to go back to Dublin. I spent many happy years there. Similarly, I didn't want to go back to Donegal. I wanted something new. And I chose Cork for a reason. Again, you would think it's God moving in a mysterious way, perhaps. But one of the reasons that I went on that holiday to India was to study an Indian system of wellness called Ayurveda. And I went to the area in which it started 5,000 years ago. And this was an interest I'd had before I ever went to India. So that's a long time ago. While there, of course, I studied it more. And then I was back maybe 10 years ago, and I was on the Late Late Show, and I was yamming on about Ayurveda as I used to do. And during the Celtic Tiger, down here in Cork, the then five-star Kingsley Hotel had a fully equipped and customized Ayurvedic spa with an Ayurvedic doctor from India, Ayurvedic therapist from India. And I think when they saw me on the Late Late, they thought, we don't really know much about what they're doing up there, but here's one of our own, and we'll get her down. So I used to go to the hotel about twice or three times a year for a couple of years. And in that way, I made friends and I got to know the city and a bit of the countryside, and I loved it.
Well,
So
my colleague here is from Cork, and he
is that
said
right?
he calls it the real capital.
So they call it.
I mean, they're very bitter when Limerick won the other day. Now he's very bitter. I thought, well, it's nice to see the underdog and the lesser players win for a change. We left it as if they left it to us,
I know. I stay out of all of that. That can rise such tempers, can't it? But I bought the house, and it's a chance you take, and you don't know the time it's going to work out. Delighted to be able to say I love it.
Can you explain to us what Ayurvedic is?
Wow, well, it's a 5,000-year-old system of medicine, and it's a fully fledged system of medicine. It's not some little silly fad of a thing. When I was sick, if ever I was sick in India, I could go to your GP style doctor here, or I could go to an Ayurvedic doctor. So fully fledged. It's basically a system of medicine that is more focused on preventative medicine than anything else. In the Western world, we go to the doc when there's something wrong. In Ayurveda, you go when there's nothing wrong, and you put all this goodness in through massage and herbal concoctions to build up your immune system, to rise up your energy levels. And that hopefully will see off a good bit of disease.
So it's a preventative rather than
preventative, but it also treats ongoing things that are there. I spent 2 weeks there last Christmas in an Ayurvedic resort, just building up my immune system. I'm very glad I did. I hope it'll last.
And how do you find now that, do you find that the fact that you spent so long in India and the fact that you are so comfortable with in your own skin and with your own person, you're being alone. I'm comfortable. I'm an only child of an only child. So I love people, but I also I'm not afraid of being on my own. Do you find that people like us adjust a little bit better to COVID, to the restrictions?
Oh God, yeah.
people.
Oh, hugely so. I mean, I've said that I actually have enjoyed the lockdowns very much. And I say that with a certain guilt
I
almost,
know. Yeah,
because
yeah,
I know there are people out there really suffering.
yeah, there
They're,
are.
they're missing the physical and human contact
I
and
know.
the freedoms. I think we have it an awful lot easier. During the first lockdown, I thought a lot of people are going to suffer mentally with this. So that's when I thought to put together a bunch of quotes about happiness. Hence, I published before Christmas a little book, pocket book called The Happy Book. I have it here. This is not deliberate, but may I? I always have
Oh,
it on the
Phoebe, that's beautiful.
desk. What it is just a collection of quotes that I've created during that first lockdown. And then I moved some of that information into Bibi's Happy Place, this private Facebook group that I started 2 weeks ago just. And in there, I'll read you and teach you and guide you in meditations. And I'll read you sleep stories in a very gentle, calm voice to help you nod off and give you lots of information and teachings on how to live more mindfully and how to get greater wellness into your daily routine. And it's by subscription, it's €20 a month. And I hope that
Yeah,
that will
that's to subscribe to your Facebook
right.
page.
Yeah, because I have no more speaking engagements like a lot of people who used to work and like
Yep.
yourself, dancing in the evenings, all gone. So
Oh,
that was my way of trying to pivot a little bit. And those are the two things that have
have you
come.
got a favorite quote from the book?
I have oodles of notebooks of quotes that I've collected over the years. I'm just gonna. Here's one here. Be a good listening ear at all times. The people around you will be grateful. And I like that one because even on television and radio now, my God, they're all talking over each other. They've lost the art of listening, apart from the really top professional ones. And it's the same with company and friendship. Be a good listening ear. The people around you will be grateful, and they will, because sometimes, we all need only that, an ear.
I say that to people, when it comes to grief, and that people say, "Oh, I don't know what to say to them.
Yeah.
What am I going to say to them?" Sometimes saying nothing is the best. Sometimes just being there and letting them talk.
Yeah.
And even if you have nothing constructive to say, sometimes you're better off saying nothing if you haven't anything constructive. But just know, just being a sounding board
Yeah.
for them.
Yeah, it works. It really does.
So you're going to continue with those, and are you going to write more books?
I have no idea. I have been asked by a publisher. It's a lovely thing to write a book about mindfulness, but I'm not in the mood to really start something big like that yet. My little Facebook group is only 2 weeks old, as I mentioned, so I need to get that more established. And I'm rather enjoying this empty space of certain days where I do very little except teach myself new dodges. I like those days.
And what's the name of your book again?
This one is called The Happy Book.
The
And
Happy Book
yeah,
by
you can
Bas.
buy it online. If you just go to my website, you'll find a button in there that'll take you to where you
And
can
your website is
bbaskin dot something.
com.
I don't know. Definitely your .com. But listen, Mary, there aren't too many BB Baskins in the world. There really aren't. I ain't
Oh,
that hard to find. And I'm all over social media. So I
oh,
can
well, we're delighted, Bibi. I'm so delighted to have met you,
well
and
it's
so delighted to have got a chance to, honored actually, to
I
have
don't
got an opportunity to sit down and listen to you.
it's a pleasure for me because this has been so many minutes of complete and utter self-indulgence. Who else will want to listen to me for an hour or so?
I
I'm
love it. I
delighted.
love listening to. I love listening to people, and I love listening to all the varieties of stories. And I mean, I interview a lot of Holocaust survivors and children of Holocaust survivors, and I asked one of them one day about the COVID situation, the fact that she was in hiding, the fact that she spent most of her time in isolation in France as a child, hiding with the family. Did that prepare her for COVID? And she said, oh my God, I never thought of that. It absolutely did, she said, because COVID to me, she said, was no different than my childhood spent locked away or retreated from the world in some respects. I think we bring things into our lives, and I think we learn to adapt.
We do, and some of us find it easier than others, it has to be said. And I think, as you mentioned earlier, you and I are the lucky ones. We really are.
We're very lucky. But Bibi, thank you again. You were a delight.
Namaste. Namaste.
Namaste.
The energy I get from the happiness thing, I think it's all related. I was asked again in an interview very recently, what do you do when you wake up in the morning and you don't feel like getting out of bed? I said, oh, for Christ's sake, that hasn't even happened once. I get up about 4:30 or 5, and she said to me, what do you do? I said, well, sometimes nothing. I'll take a video of the dawn, or I look up some quotes about the beauty, and I listen to the stillness, and I'll still my mind. Now, Irish people and Western people will say, that's the lazy out bitch, she does nothing in the morning. But I'm actually doing an awful lot of good for myself in the morning, and that contributes to the happiness.